we were taught all through our childhood, that our country is the United States of America. And this was at home as well as in Japanese school. Our teachers told us, although we are Japanese citizens and will fight for Japan in case of war, your duty is to the United States of America, and they strongly impressed that on us. Yeah. So my parents, they understood and they taught me that way. So.
Were they relocated, or did they suffer anything as far as internment was concerned?
No, my own parents, I guess, were not as important as other people. They were not interned, but my school teachers were. Like the principal of our Japanese school, Mr. Maehara, he was interned, and the Buddhist minister, I think, was interned.
What was his name? Do you remember?
At that time, I think it was Reverend Miura. I think he was interned, and anybody who was anybody at all, was interned.
And where were they interned? Do you know?
Well, they were taken, I think, to either Sand Island or someplace around Barbers Point, Honolulu. But they had a barbed wire enclosure, and tents, and that's where they were kept until they were transferred to the mainland.
And they were then transferred to the mainland?
Yeah, those who were interned.
Did you ever see the internment camp here at Barbers Point or Sand Island?
No, I did not see, but I can only imagine what it must have been like. Mm-hmm. Well, we were fortunate here compared to those on the mainland. They were uprooted and really put into concentration camps. They lost all their property and a lot of their assets.
Were some of the Hawaiians who were relocated, did they also lose their property? Was that confiscated?
No, because they had children and, relatives who were able to, I guess, take over for them while they were interned.
Well, while we were in the camp, our national organization, which is the Japanese American Citizens League, our leaders were also in camp. And they got together and they said, we got to petition the government and letting the Japanese Americans, or at that time we were called Niseis. Ni means second, and Sei is the generation, second generations that were born in America who were automatically American citizens by birth. And they said, we shouldn't be in this camp, we should be out fighting for our country. But the government doesn't trust us, and they don't think we're loyal enough. So they said, we got to petition the Washington to allow us to form our own unit then, and then let us serve in the U.S. Army and find out if we are loyal or not. And this went on for a few months. And in the meantime, there were a lot of opposition to this also in the camps themselves, especially the ones that were born here, but went back to Japan, were educated in Japan, and then came back to the United States. Well, they spoke more Japanese than they did in English. And they says, no, why should we go? I mean, they put us in these camps. So there was a pretty big controversy for a while, but our leaders finally prevailed, and they kept urging Congress to let us Niseis volunteer for the service and prove our loyalty. And so the government finally says, okay, says we'll let you volunteer from the camps then. And so,
Were you pleased about that or not? Or?
oh yeah, I was pleased, right? Because otherwise you're still disloyal, according to the government. And even the GIs that were in the service at that time, they still considered them disloyal also.
Even in the service?
Even in the service. Because I remember in Fort Riley, Kansas, I had a friend from Monterey who was in the service at that time, and he was stationed in Fort Riley. President Roosevelt was making a tour of these Army camps, and he was scheduled to go to Fort Riley, Kansas. At that time, they took all the Japanese American GIs in uniform and put them in the Huska, or in the Huska, until the president came and left, and then they let them out again. Now that is really something that you know, your dignity is gone. I mean, you're in the service and you still have to follow orders like that. That really doesn't make sense.
You were made a criminal.
That's right.
And was it to be presumed that if you had this fighting unit, that this would be something positive for your families as well?
Yes, definitely. Because it helped. Well, as you know, the record of the 442nd was astronomical, and without that support from people that knew about the 442nd, the Japanese Americans, when they went back to the West Coast, they would never have survived. I mean, they would have. It would have been a not a massacre, but I mean, you wouldn't be able to live peacefully, because even in 1945, when they were allowing inmates from these concentration camps to return to California and Washington and Oregon, when they got to their homes, they were threatened, and they had graffiti on their homes and whatever, and they were threatened with death by the citizens around there.
Did this happen to your family?
No, because my family didn't go back to California. So we didn't have anything to go back to.
That's right, you said.
Yeah, because, but the ones that did go back, they had either their property back home, if it was kept intact for them, or they had a business that, like this rice farmer. He was the biggest, they called him the Rice King in Dos Palace, and he lost 2/3 of his property, which was over a couple of thousand acres. And he never did get it back.
Never, ever?
Never.
What other kind of discrimination did you and your family experience?
Well, having a name like Dojo, that was something else. But I didn't look at it as discrimination in that event. I anticipated that. Because it was building up. You could tell you're segregated, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do that. But blackout, which was the most, was for everybody. And that was okay, but then they came into your home to, I mean, they're not going to have any notice. They just come in and say, wait, we want to check the entire place. Now, that's okay, but I remember being a Buddhist, we had tiny shrine that we had pictures of our ancestors and things like that. And I don't know if it was from the FBI or the Army intelligence that came in, and they just started to just ransack. So my dad and my mom just didn't say anything. And I stood over there just for about 5 minutes and I popped off. And that didn't go over well, but I cursed. I told them, you're going to have a 1,000-year curse on you for doing that, you know. But, you know, it's just a kid saying something. But I was angry. I was really angry. And I was told to hush up in a very strong words, but it didn't bother me, yeah. But I know my parents were very afraid of that because I would pop off any time things like that would happen.